everyone. Welcome to CWU Live. First of all, I should say, thank you for bearing with us. We're coming to you 20 minutes late. I do promise you we were ready to go live on the dot at 5 p.m, but then the computers crashed and we had to reboot them. But we are here and we've got so much to talk about today. Lots and lots of updates. And I'm joined by someone who knows probably more than anyone else about the updates we're going to talk about. Deputy General Secretary Postal, Martin Walsh. Martin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year, belated.
We were going to introduce the show something a bit more light-hearted than usual. We are going to stick with it, though. I'm going to rush through it because I know you've been waiting for quite a long time. But we do have to show you some of these images because I love them. On the CWU Facebook page this week, we asked you for pictures of your animal friends all dressed up with bonus points if they were wearing CWU colours. These are some of our favourites. This is Opie, Hayley Moffat's Mog in a CWU overall. These are Trish Williams' pups in Christmassy gear. You can see here Jason Bath's dog Rehab on a CWU picket line. Completely gorgeous dog there. Laura Ludbrook has a gorgeous mog repping the CWU Suffolk Amel branch, although I have to say that cat doesn't look too pleased to be wearing the CWU hat. This is April O'Neill's pup Marley in the CWU dog overall. And I couldn't resist but put a picture of my dog in here, looking humiliated in full Christmas gear. She doesn't yet have full CWU colours, but I'm trying to work on that. Martin, are you a dog or a cat person?
Dog. Got two.
You got two?
Yeah.
Do you dress them up?
My wife does, but...
What does she dress them up in?
Coats and everything.
Coats, okay, just to keep them warm. We'll get straight to the main business. We've been keeping you waiting long enough. And we want to start the show with some big news. There's a big breakthrough was announced just before Christmas with the agreement with the EP Group. And we'll be talking about that a bit more later, although you did hear lots of that news before Christmas. Alongside that, though, the CWU secured additional contractual hours for 11,000 members in Royal Mail, with over 7,000 moving from part-time to full-time. I understand this was sort of something you put on the table as part of the USO pilot negotiation. So this is sort of a bit of a win for the CWU. This is something you were putting forward and that has been accepted by Royal Mail. Can you explain what it means? What has been agreed here?
Okay, look, what happened last year, that was Royal Mail put a blanket policy on all part-time uplifts. If they accepted them, they had to move to new entrants' terms and conditions, which was totally unacceptable, totally unfair. We were determined to change that because that stopped thousands of part-timers getting an opportunity to move with their hours based on seniority. And within the talks on the USO pilots, we were able to use our leverage to get an agreement which said that any part-timer who gets an uplift will be able to keep their terms and conditions on legacy-style conditions. And that applies to every single part-timer who now gets an uplift. During those discussions, Royal Mail revealed there was circa 11,000 individuals on a variation of contract. And some of these had been on a variation of contract, temporary variation since 2016. And 8,552 were part-time to full-time. Now, it's quite clear when we've looked at the data, some of these individuals actually believed they were permanent. And therefore, it's come as a shock that they've been told, no, you were only ever temporary. And bearing in mind, we're going to go through the biggest change ever in deliveries, the USO change. These individuals could have been told, you've lost your variation, you're back to the hours you originally came in, and therefore stick with it. We insisted with Royal Mail that they had to give these individuals permanent contracts. Now, the important bit here, in terms of seniority, because seniority should always apply, but here's the issue. Seniority is a two-way street. it should be applied locally when you go to a variation. So I'm looking at some stats here. Bristol Mail Centre, there's 61 part-time to full-time variations. These aren't new variations, they've been in place for some time. Exeter Delivery, 23 variations. Doncaster, 100 variations, part-time to full-time. These individuals have been working these hours upwards of 5 to 6 years, and some more recently, over the last 2 to 3 years. And therefore, they should have got that on variation of contract based on seniority. And the local branch, the local reps should have made sure it was done on seniority. Now, looking at some of the information, speaking to some reps, the vast majority are saying it has been done in seniority and these individuals are entitled to those contracts. And in fact, the vast majority of the inquiries we're getting is individuals saying, oh, I thought I was permanent. And therefore, it's important we confirm all 11,000 that they will get a permanent contract, especially as we move towards the USO. Now, there are 4 buckets we're working through. The first bucket is 8,552 part-time to full-time variable contracts. And we've given this information to all our branches. We've got some of the names of these individuals. We've got the length of the contract and the seniority, etc., start date. And we're working with branches to make sure the data is right. But everyone should get the opportunity to be uplifted before the 31st of January, backdated to the 5th of January. And that's important because, as I said, we're going to go through USO reform later this year. If we didn't make these people permanent, they'd lose their variation. They wouldn't be able to sign for full-time duty because they'd be based on a part-time hours, and they wouldn't be able to apply for VR or sign for a job. So it's important we confirm this and we get all these individuals made up. Now, the four buckets are part-time to full-time. There's 1,701 individuals on a part-time increase of hours who will get that opportunity, and there's 343 individuals who are on 35 hours but are working constantly past 37 hours. They will get an opportunity to move to 37 hours. There's a 4th bucket, which we're working with Royal Mail, which is when the 4 Pillars agreement came in, full-time hours were capped at 35 hours in 2018, up to the 1st of December 2022 when new entrants came in. That group, there's a significant number who are, some of are working 37 hours on a constant basis, but on a 35-hour contract. We're determined to give those individuals an opportunity to move to 37 hours before the USO, and we're working through Royal Mail. So overall, this is a good news story, but I want to come on to the next part of this. We didn't originally go into those discussions knowing there was 11,000 individuals on a variation of contract. And there's a lesson here for us all. When a manager says to an individual, we're going to make you temporary or we're going to make you permanent, you have to ensure you get a contract of employment for a permanent full-time job or an uplift in contracts. And that's what we haven't done. We've gone with the manager saying, well, it's going to be an uplift, and hasn't transpired. The second part to this is we've now cleared that every single local office and every single branch should now engage in line with the job security agreement on twice-a-year reviews against part-time hours. And if they're working regular hours above their contracted hours, they can now put a case towards Royal Mail to make sure these individuals are permanently uplifted on their legacy terms and conditions in seniority order. The third thing which we're doing is under the USO pilots, and under USO reform, all the modelling is showing there is going to be an increase in part-time to full-time jobs of between 15 and 20%. So there will be a further opportunity for part-timers to move to full-time hours, again, in seniority order. The important bit here is we've protected seniority within the EP agreement. We've protected that clause by saying all national agreements are still in place. We've got to make sure we administer seniority in every workplace, in every branch, every division, and we will do that nationally as well.
And yes, I just want to clarify, because lots of people sort of putting forward their particular sort of scenarios of how many hours they've been working, how long they've been working for the company. We'll go through some of these examples sort of individually. But to start, because I think a lot of people are thinking, am I qualified? Do I qualify as someone who can go from a part-time contract to a full-time contract? Now, on a basic level, what's been going on for previous years is lots of people have been on part-time contracts, but have been working full-time hours, essentially, right? Because they've been given lots and lots of overtime. And you've said all of these people who've been working part-time, or sorry, who've had a part-time contract but been working full-time, they should get a full-time contract. But it's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it? Because it might be the case that someone who's got a part-time contract but has been working full-time, that there might be someone more senior than them who hasn't been doing the overtime, and actually it would be that senior person who hasn't been doing the overtime who would get the choice of going full-time first.
Okay, let me just clarify on this, Michael, because it's important. There is the 11,000 I'm talking about are people who actually have signed a variation of contract. So they've got a different contract, so their hours might be 20 hours, they've signed a variation of contract to work full-time. Mm-hmm. And they should have got that variation in line with their seniority, because no one can tell me in somewhere like Doncaster, where there's 200 odd people working, that 100 part-time to full-time has basically got a variation without our reps and branches insisting that's done in seniority order. And that I could name all list of units. We've got to have been in those workplaces making sure it's done in seniority.
Yeah.
So those people on a variation, we are confident. Like I say, some of these people have been working since 2019, 2018 on a variation contract. No branch, no one's raised this before, saying, well, we got all these people on variations, seniority has been undermined. That is one group where they've been working those hours constantly. These aren't new hours. They've been working those hours over a number of years, or more recently, a year or two. So that's one group. Then you've got our national agreement, where we should be reviewing twice a year any part-timer who's working regular hours over their contract against workload which is going to be there in the future, not a sick absence, but maybe coming in before their duty, do IPS, do other work, or being protracted on delivery where it's constantly, but they can't complete. Those hours, in line with our agreement, there should be a case going to basically the manager saying that individual should be made up, an increase in hours. Again, that is done on seniority, should be done on seniority. Now, there is always difficulties in this, because I might be the part-timer who regularly works an extra 20 hours, but not the senior one. But seniority is what we've agreed, and therefore the most senior part-timer has the opportunity to achieve that full-time role or an increase in hours. On the variation of contract issue, it's important to say some of these individuals, and I know because I've checked it with them, they actually believed they've been made up. It's permanent. And what's happened is the manager has obviously put that up to HR, and they've not changed to a permanent contract. And there's a lot of individuals who've now been shocked to think, oh, well, hold up, I thought I was permanent. Why it's crucial we get this done before July, there is likely to be USO reform. Royal Mail making up 8,500 full-time to part-time on a permanent addition is going to add to potentially VR costs. So it's a big move getting these people on a permanent contract, whereas Royal Mail might have just said, we're taking you off your variation, go back to your original contracted hours. So it's a significant move to get these people permanent, but we shouldn't stop there. Branches, local reps should review. Now we've cleared, they can remain on legacy terms and conditions. We should be reviewing part-time hours. And it may well be that they have to go on a variation of contract because of the USO change. But we should get them on that variation of contract because attrition rates, etc., and the method change on the USO may well mean you still can be made up part-time to full-time when we deploy your unit's USO reform.
Let's go to sort of to make this clear, because this is quite complicated. I want to go to a number of sort of individual scenarios which people have put in their comments. So they've said, this is my situation. Do I qualify? So John Freeman says, I'm on a 30-hour contract. What bucket am I in? And will I be given full time?
First question I would ask him, are you on a variation of contract? A variation of contract means you're on 30 hours, the managers come to you and ask you to sign an individual contract which says you are now working full-time hours on a temporary variation of contract. That's one scenario. If he's on that, he will get the opportunity to become a full-time job. But that would mean he's working 37 hours every single week. Mm-hmm. The second column is if he's 30 hours and he's not on a variation of contract, but he's working above his hours every single day, every single week. He would be entitled to have his contract reviewed in line with our agreement, and if he's working regular hours, he would be entitled to an uplift in line with our agreement.
But what it sounds like, from all the information, so John Freeman, feel free to give more information in the comments, but from what it sounds like, John Freeman, who's on a 30-hour contract and has been working 30 hours, if he's actually doesn't say that, but let's assume he has been working 30 hours and he's on a 30-hour contract, he's probably not entitled to an uplift.
No, if he's working just 30 hours. However, when we move to the USO reform, depending on where the surplus is going to be in delivery units, some units won't have any surplus at all, there will be a requirement for more full-time jobs. At that point, Jason might be able to get a full-time job because all the modelling is showing which a 15 to 20% extra uplift in full-time jobs. But it will depend on how many surplus every unit has. And with attrition rates now, some units will have no surplus, so there will be an opportunity for part-time to full-time maximisation of full-time jobs.
Right, now let's go to someone who, from what you've said, to me seems like they probably will get an uplift. So Garth Knight says he's well, I don't know their gender actually. Garth Knight says they're part-time, doing full-time hours as overtime for years. Does this count?
It counts towards a review of his duty, or her duty, but again, unless they're on a variation of contract, and this is a key, you would have signed a variation of contract. So there's 10,500 people who've signed a variation of contract to work the extra hours, and they have been working those extra hours since they basically had the variation contracts. Those individuals will get a permanent contract. Then the other group of individuals who come under our national agreement, where we review twice a year the hours they work above their contracted hours, should kick in, and we should review your hours. If that hourage is necessary in the future, then you should be given an uplift, or the most senior person in your unit given an uplift.
Yeah. Again, this person isn't necessarily guaranteed to qualify because it might be that there's someone more senior in their office who would get it instead of them. Let's go for a few more. CTG says, seniority, I've done 18 years and still don't qualify. That is possible, isn't it?
Depending on what unit. And again, the spreadsheet which that individual should ask their branch to share, which went out with the LTB, is how many in that unit fall into that category. And I'll give you some numbers because this is important in context. So in the Southwest, we've got Bristol Mail Centre, 61 people on a variation. St Austell, 34. Newton Abbot, 31. Weston-super-Mare, 27. Bournemouth, 26. Birmingham Mail Centre, 33. Nottingham Processing, 25. We've got Lincoln, 52. So these are significant numbers right across the UK. And therefore, they would have been on a variation in the vast majority of cases based on their seniority. You don't make 52 people on a variation of contract in an office like Lincoln without the reps being involved to make sure there's a fair process in line with seniority. So it is important people understand that, but 18 years service, if his unit is part of that, then it should be reviewed. I don't know what branch he's in, but we should get someone to review his hours along with, obviously, any other part-timers within that unit.
And there's a question from someone called DB, which I think links back to something you were saying before. So you were saying lots of people who are on these variation contracts, they thought they'd been given a full-time job. And DB says, what's the point in a variation contract if it can be rescinded by Royal Mail at any time? And I suppose that's because people think if they've got a part-time job and then they're given this variation contract, which means they work full-time hours, they think they've been given a full-time job, but they haven't. And you're saying lots of people who are now on these or have been on these variation contracts, which they thought was a permanent job, are now going to be given a permanent job based on seniority.
Yeah, so when you come into Royal Mail, you sign a permanent contract. And if you then increase your hours, there's two ways of increasing your hours on. One is a temporary variation, which these 8,552 part-timers did. And some of them would have thought they've done it on a permanent basis. What the system under Royal Mail system shows, these were temporary uplifts, variation of contracts. We're now making sure it's permanent, so you have the same rights as any other permanent full-time position. So under the USO, if there's a reduction in jobs in your unit, your contract isn't levelled down to the part-time. You're entitled to sign in your seniority for a job. You're entitled to opt for VR if that's a part of it. And you're treated the same as every other full-time permanent position. So it is important that we get these done as quickly as possible. But the other group of part-timers who want an increase in contract hours, who aren't working a variation, branches, local reps, divisions should be making sure now we've cleared the position they can remain on their legacy terms and conditions. We should be getting to work to review these and try and get some of these over the line in seniority order.
Yeah. I'm just going to go for one more because this is nice and concrete. John Francier, hi from Doncaster. I'm on 30-hour variation contract for more than 2 years now. Been working full-time hours ever since and doing IPS sorting every morning. Do I qualify for the uplift part-time to full-time? I'm not sure if I actually asked that one, or I'm confused because lots of these are actually quite similar. Lots of people are in a similar situation. I don't think I have asked that one. Well, you've got your Doncaster numbers there, haven't you? You can be very specific here.
Yeah. I think what's important there is there's 100 part-time to full-time variation of contracts. It's the highest outside of the Warrington hub in a delivery office. 100 part-time to full-time in Doncaster who are on a variation will get offered a permanent full-time job. And I assume That will include yourself, because anyone on a variation of contract, this covers every single variation of contract left in our grades.
And because we've got other things to talk about today as well, if there's someone watching this who's still unsure whether they qualify, what should they do? They should get in contact with their rep?
Contact your rep, contact your branch, by all means contact your division, who will contact us. We are determined, like I said, this started with Royal Mail saying any new part-time contract would have to accept working Sundays, moving to monthly pay, going on a less hourly rate, losing your delivery supplements or processing supplements, and we weren't having it. And we've changed that in the joint statement before Christmas. What then came out is we had just under 11,000 individuals who are basically on a variation of contract. We didn't know that, and our divisions, branches, didn't know that. And we changed that. We made sure during the biggest change we've ever going to face in deliveries, we're putting an extra permanent 8,552 part-time to full-time permanent positions into Royal Mail. At a time, there will be obviously voluntary redundancies. It's going to increase potentially the numbers of redundancies because of that, but it's the right thing to do, and we need to get this done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. So sort of in terms of people's individual situation, get in contact with your rep. It's coming across. It's not simple who's definitely going to apply, definitely going to sort of qualify for this kind of thing. So it's going to be a case by case basis. But the big picture is lots more people are going to be on full-time contracts than they would have otherwise been, and it's a much stronger position for the workforce and the union if more people are on full-time contracts when the USO renegotiation happens, or when the new USO comes in.
And there's a lesson here for us all. When someone says they're getting a permanent contract, you only get a permanent contract if you sign something, sign a new contract. And all our branches and reps must make sure when a manager says we're going to give you an uplift, make sure it's a permanent uplift on a permanent contract, not a variation, not a temporary variation, or otherwise we're going to have this same problem again.
Right, very important. Different topic. Richard Bryan and Simon Tiplady have both asked on, I think probably the Facebook, one of our social media accounts, lots of noise of an overtime ban right now in so many places. So my understanding is that there are lots of delivery offices where after the Christmas break, letters have begun piling up, and the managers of those delivery offices have been told, let it pile up, we can't afford any overtime. What's your understanding of what's going on there? Okay,
there are some of those units which have been flagged up. If we're honest, there's a range of problems in delivery offices at this moment in time. There's a high sickness level because obviously it's flu going around, sickness peaked, I think, at 7.2% last week. But there is definitely some managers, and we've got the evidence, which we've supplied to Royal Mail, which said cut overtime off and allowed quality to fall. That isn't consistent across all the UK, because our reports are showing there are offices where still paying overtime. We've asked every single division to come back to us on that information. But we have raised this with the company. They've given us some stats, as they would do, which says overtime levels are still at 7.8 hours per individual in Royal Mail. And it was at 7.8 in October. So they're saying there isn't a cut-off of overtime everywhere. But we would say to you, if it's happening in your unit, raise it to your branch, raise it to your division. They will raise it to their regional operations director, and if they can't resolve it, raise it to us. We are meeting on a Friday, Tony Bush on behalf of the officers, and meeting Ricky McCauley to review where there is overtime bans. Obviously, quality has gone down. I was just meeting Ofcom before this meeting. It's now in the early 70s. It should be at 93.5. And some of this is obviously linked to Royal Mail trying to get back to profitability ahead of any takeover. But we should be challenging it locally at branch level and raising it up to divisions to make sure we resolve this. It has calmed down a bit as the reports we're getting from branches, but if it's still happening in your units, please raise it as I've just said.
Yeah, and it sounds like from the comments this is happening in a number of units. So Matthew says, hi from Edinburgh West, any news on the overtime ban? Being on a 30-hour contract, I rely on my overtime to build my hours. And I can see sort of lots of other people seem to be having the same experience. You're saying this is something that the union is taking action on.
Yeah.
I was speaking to Chris earlier. My understanding was also this might be something you're discussing with Ofcom about. You said they've come here. So if Ofcom aren't going to be impressed, presumably, if Royal Mail are doing overtime bans when letters are piling up.
No, and we had that discussion before this and also around the USO pilots. In terms of Edinburgh, I'm not sure you said, was it Edinburgh East?
Edinburgh West it was.
I was going to say there's 14 variations in Edinburgh East who will get offered a part-time, full-time permanent job.
I think this is an important question, actually, because you were talking there about the importance of making sure you've signed a contract and knowing what's in it, because lots of people sort of thought they were on permanent when they weren't necessarily. And Alex Walks said, read your employment contracts as a piece of advice. And then Ken Howard has said, very reasonably, I think, how would you get a copy of your contract?
You can ask your HR.
You can ask your HR.
You can ring up Sheffield, get your employment contract. You're entitled to do that. And, if you think there's issues there. I think what's happened is Royal Mail, because they wanted to put people on new entrants, and people wouldn't accept it, they've just made sure they go on a variation. Albeit, some of these, one I saw, some of them 2019, but there are even 2016, 2017. And there's no doubt these individuals actually believed they were on a permanent contract.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So you think they didn't want to put them on a full-time contract because they wanted to hold out until there was a new entrance contract?
Yeah.
But one of the things through negotiations you've sort of ensured is that people getting this uplift are going to be on the legacy contract,
yeah,
not the new entrance contract.
Exactly.
So to some degree it might have backfired for them.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the USO pilot schemes and the USO pilot offices. I know that will be one of the things you were discussing with Ofcom.
Yeah, look, we've been discussing with Royal Mail and Ofcom and obviously the new owners around USO reform. Every single other country in the Western world are going through USO reform. And there's only really two options for USO reform. One is you cut the days you deliver, so it's a frequency debate. And obviously, if we'd cut Saturdays maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, it probably would have costed in. But just reducing Saturdays now isn't a cost saver to what it was 5 or 6 years ago, and it won't sustain Royal Mail in the future. So the two options is, do you reduce, and we're not going to accept reducing to a 4 or 3 day. 3 days, what Belgium did. And the number of jobs we would lose, would be frightening. And then you look at speed of delivery options. Germany, far bigger country in the UK, have just come off using airplanes to carry mail by delaying first class by a day. Again, we don't think it would be right to delay first class in that way. So what we've gone with is the optimised delivery model, which means first class is delivered 6 days a week with all parcels, 6 days a week. But second class and non-priority items, letters, etc., is delivered Monday to Friday, every other day to an address. And what that does is obviously improves numbers of Saturdays off, improves attendance patterns, it will improve quality, And it also, there's fatigue issues around that, and it will increase part-time to full-time. This is the biggest change we will see in deliveries, and it won't be done on a structural revision basis. It will be done on a method change. And those of you around, have, been around for a fair time, the last time we done a method change was when we moved from 2 deliveries to 1 in 2003. At that stage, 94% of delivery staff were still working 6 days a week. There was no rest days. It was 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday, every single week. And we went overnight in every single unit to 5-day working and collapsed 2 deliveries into 1. And a very similar method change is going to be approached on USO reform. But you have to test, as we did on 2 deliveries to 1, how this works in pilots. And we've agreed 37 pilot sites in all parts of the UK, all 4 countries of the UK. We've selected rural delivery offices, we've selected towns, urbans, cities, to really test some of the assumptions. And we've gone into this on the basis we don't believe some will work. The method change will work in every single location. But we want to test it because that's the right thing to do. We want to improve attendance patterns for everyone. And we want to also recognise some people enjoy Wellingtons types of tendencies. We're going to try and keep that, but we want to improve it. And I always say this, in 1988, Royal Mail agreed with the CWU that you could move to a 5-day delivery option. However, only 6% of the workforce decided to take that up. Instead, they stayed on a 6-day working week for 14, 15 years before we made 5-day working mandatory. And we can't be in the same place where 70% of people are just on a 1 in 6 standard attendance pattern. We've got to improve people's ability to have more time away from work, as well as fewer Saturdays. And one of the things we want to do in this pilot is really test the ability to have basically less days at work, more time off, and fewer Saturdays. Because when you're here on the all mail dates, the delivery span's going to be more, longer. And some of the assumptions is going to increase between 30 minutes Wednesday to Friday and 40 minutes on Mondays and Tuesdays. However, you're not going to be delivering to any more addresses than your current duty. It's just that you're going to go up more the garden path more, because your call rate moves from 58% to 78%. Because obviously you're delivering 2 days mail on the all mail routes. On the first class routes, your call rate will be 20%, but because you're delivering parcels Wednesday to Saturday, you will need further duties, and there will be 4-day week options Wednesday to Saturday. So we're determined to look at this in a way which says, can we maximise more time away from work, including Walton pluses, including 4-day week. But the other thing we're looking at is, how do we resolve fatigue? So wouldn't it be good that if I'm walking 1 week on my all mail day, I'm off on a Saturday, then the following week I'm doing a first class driving route where I'm not walking, and then the third week I'm doing a 4-day week, Wednesday to Saturday, and therefore I've really reduced my fatigue on deliveries. So we want to look at that option. This model also supports non-drivers, but the important bit here because we want to support non-drivers, and they will play a massive important role in USO. But the important bit here, since 2010 and BT 2010, the amount of drivers, because CDVs required drivers in delivery offices, is significantly more than it used to be. And everyone who joined after 2010 has it written in their contract to drive. So the majority of people in most delivery units drive. So we want to give them the opportunity, because they will have to be the ones working Saturdays, because it's only van routes on a Saturday, first class and parcels, to have fatigue options to reduce it, and also improved attendances, including less Saturdays.
Jazz has asked how many job losses are predicted with the USO change. And I suppose I've got an additional question here, which is, part of the pilots is to work out how a USO change would work. Is the idea that in these pilot offices, you're working out how many jobs can be sort of removed? What's the relationship there?
Yeah, look. In terms of Jazz's point, let's touch on that in a sec, because I think I want to give some detail. It's your point. We are looking at a method change where some of these assumptions won't work. So Royal Mail will say you got 50 duties in an office currently, and providing those 50 duties are clearing all the mail now, on a Monday, you're only going to go to 50% of the delivery points with all the mail. Mm-hmm. So you only need 25 routes going to those 25 walks, and then you need first class duties. And again, there's a method assumption which says for every 2 duties you need 1 van route, because your call rate is 20%. However, Wednesday to Saturday, parcel volumes increase and you need an extra duty. So that then drives how many jobs potentially in an office is available. Again, how many duties do you need on a Saturday? The assumption is you need basically 2 duties to every first class van duty Monday to Friday. Again, that's an assumption which drives a change. You can't do that in rules, because a rule delivery span is too long now to suddenly say we're going to give you 2 days work. It doesn't work. So there's further assumptions you've got to do. Again, in firms. So West 1's part of the trial, Oxford Street, etc. Again, you've got to deliver to the firms every day. So what does that mean to somewhere like that? So we're going to test that. And that therefore means getting to a job reduction is very difficult. And it can range. The VR numbers Royal Mail's got on this is between 1,600 to 2,600. So the numbers on voluntary redundancy, the pot is that number. However, there will be natural wastage above that, but it's very hard to get to a job number reduction until you do the trials. The other thing which is an advantage in this is there is no job reductions upstream. So no in processing, in area distribution, in network, there is no job reductions as a result of the USO change. There will be some changes because area distribution will have to adapt in terms of times. Mail centres will have to do more sequencing on a Sunday night, less on a Friday night. So all those things will come through this. But in terms of job numbers, the VR ranges between 1,600 to 2,600 at the tops.
Lots of people in the comments saying this is all quite confusing. It is all quite confusing, isn't it? I want to put one question to you from someone called Callum Morton, who says, Jesus, I've been at Royal Mail for 8 months and this is all confusing. I work on a 30-hour contract, but they have me on a 1 in 4 walk. I average about 55 to 65 hours a week. I have to work every single Sunday as well. Is that normal? That sounds.
As a new entrant. So let's get to this. Is quite confusing, and we had a meeting with all our local reps in the North East yesterday in York, and we explained the USO to experienced reps, local reps and area reps, and it is confusing. And we recognise, and I think Royal Mail recognise, this is the biggest change. It's complicated because it's a change which we've never done before, and you separate non-priority items from first class. At the moment, we all know whatever comes in delivery office goes out and either gets delivered or gets left in the frames in there. This time, the work basically doesn't necessarily come into your unit for those walks, which aren't due all mail on that date. It stays on the sequencing, or it gets sorted on a different frame. So there will be a first class frame in delivery offices as well as a non-priority item frame. So we recognise it's confusing. We're trying to get to a communication which explains it without confusing people. But without a doubt, some of the most experienced people in the union, it's taken them quite a bit of time to understand it. So it doesn't surprise me some of our members, some of our reps are a little bit confused about this. It's our job to produce a communication. It's Royal Mail's job to produce a communication. And what we're going to learn from most pilots, we'll also give them an opportunity for individuals to see how it works. The reality of the situation, though, and it is important people understand, where we are, letters are going to continue to decline. But it's not just that issue which is the problem. Liberalisation of postal services, prior to 2007, Royal Mail used to get all the revenue for all their letters. From the easy part, the outward collections, the outward mail centre, all the way through to inward to the final mail. Liberalisation of postal services, downstream access, allowed all the cherry pickers to cream off the top by taking all the work which Royal Mail used to have and do the outward part, the cheaper part, and then put it into Royal Mail system and expect them to deliver to 33 million addresses. And what's grown is 70% of all letters now are downstream access. So Royal Mail have lost a significant revenue over the years, and that's going to change because everyone is now down trading. 40% of all letters are now in that economy mail product, which doesn't go out, stays on the sequencer machine until there's 2 letters, or it gets kicked out after 5 days. So, what we've got to do is make sure the USO provides job security, provides good terms and conditions, and make sure our members can clear their workload, fair and manageable workload, and they have a better future than if this company doesn't exist. And that's what we're determined to make sure under USO reform it produces.
Lots of questions about new entrants. When are new entrants getting basic human rights, says Winter.
Yeah, you will note we've agreed with EP to equalise new entrants' terms and conditions. And we're going to get into talks with Royal Mail over the next month, how we do that. The important bit here is that we're going to agree a career path, and we're going to move part-time new entrants within 3 months, the first step of equalising their terms and conditions. Because I think the individual said he has to work every Sunday. That's not acceptable. And new entrants were imposed by the previous board. The unions never agreed on. We were determined to equalise their terms and conditions. We made that one of our priority issues with EP. We've agreed that in the agreement. We are going to get into discussions because it's the only right thing to do, and we're determined to make sure the first stage of that is after 3 months. Now, clearly, this can't happen until the transaction takes place, but if you saw it yesterday, the EU and the states have now agreed, the regulation agreed to the takeover. There's only Romania and Canada, which is now regulators which have to now clear it before they can then go to the stock market and float and see whether they get 75% of the shares. And we are moving closer to basically the takeover, but that gives us a real opportunity to improve new entrants' terms and conditions.
I've got 3 questions here about Amazon that I want to roll into one. So Rand Sin says, how much will overtime rates increase by? Other competitors such as Amazon and DHL get time and a half. JKC says Amazon started trialling Royal Mail style deliveries in London, door to door, so especially sort of commercial mail, I think. Are we going to lose the advertising mail too? And Dead Man's Shoes says pay is rubbish, people leaving to join Amazon FFS. So lots of people sort of seem to be thinking Royal Mail are getting one over, Amazon are getting one over Royal Mail. What's your sort of take on those points there?
I mean, I don't know if anyone saw the select committee, how people are treating in Amazon. Like, it was shocking. And Amazon isn't a good employer. Didn't want to reveal anything at the select committee about some of the actions they were dealing with. Where are we with Royal Mail on this? Again, the EP agreement talks around reviewing overtime rates and SA rates. You have to look at this in the round. When I first started in Royal Mail was an overtime culture. Low pay, low basic pay, 6 days a week, higher, you could do as many hours overtime. This union made the right decision, which says we've got to improve basic pay. And we were determined to do that. And we did it under a few things, a way forward, unpopular agreement at the time, very unpopular agreement at the time, 2 deliveries into 1. But we also had a strategy to reduce the shorter working week. So when I first started, my hourly hours was 43 hours. We're now down to 37 hours. When you reduce the shorter working week, you remain on the same basic pay, so your hourly rate goes up, but it doesn't compare with, doesn't keep pace with overtime rates or scheduled attendance rates. And that's why overtime rates are so low. We are going to, under the agreement, we'll review overtime rates and SA rates. New entrants' overtime rates, by the way, are 1.25, so they're higher, albeit they have a lower hourly rate and they've got worse terms and conditions. So we will improve overtime and SA rates. The other thing we're looking at, and it works well in parcel force at the moment, is why wouldn't you get a price per parcel on some of the other growth areas? So we're not just limited to an increase in overtime rates of SA, we may well look at other ideas. And the other thing we're looking at within the agreement is a performance incentive scheme where people are rewarded for performance. They receive a regular bonus on top of their normal basic pay.
Lots of questions about pay rises. When are we going to get a pay rise?
We're due a pay rise in April. Again, we're going to go into negotiations in the next few weeks to achieve a pay rise. And we're looking at a 3-year pay deal. We want an above inflation pay rise. And we've got decisions around consolidation of the delivery supplements, the processing supplements, and the collection supplements to make, because at the moment they are outside pensionable pay, and we want to try and move them towards into basic pay. So there's a range of things we're going to do over the next few weeks, but pay rise is due in April, and we're determined to make sure we got an in-time pay rise, but we're not losing sight of we might want to use our leverage, because the USO isn't due to July, to make sure we maximise basic pay by saying we're not going to agree to USO until you've given us a good above inflation pay rise. So we're not shutting ourselves away from making sure we address basic pay. Notwithstanding, the company will say, as they have been saying to us on every occasion, the national insurance rise means they have to now pay out an extra £120 million, which is obviously hitting their what they're going to offer and pay. But our position has always been we want an above inflation pay rise.
Mm-hmm. And this is another one of those issues where you think you can use the USO renegotiation as leverage, where you can say we're only going to agree to the new USO if, one of them wasn't it was, or that was the EP. Yeah, one of them is you want new entrants to go onto legacy contracts, you want a proper pay rise, and you want sort of a better work-life balance.
It's not only that. Anyone who reads the agreement, our support for USO reform is conditional on them resolving Section 5 of basically the EP agreement, which includes a new resourcing model, the equalisation of part-time to full-time, a reduction in agency, improvements in SSP, improvements in VR, improvements in overtime levels, new ways of working, alongside working and a reset of employee and industrial relations. We have got a pay rise. So we've got a maximum leverage of how we're going to use our around USO.
Yeah. A couple of questions that we should have sort of clarified earlier. So someone says, what is new USO? That's a universal service obligation. That's going to be what Royal Mail what obligations they have to meet, in terms of how often they have to deliver what kinds of letters. Someone also says, what is this VR you're talking about? Sorry, just joined. VR, voluntary redundancy. So it's going to be a number of jobs which will be removed from the company after the USO, but you're going to say there's going to be no mandatory redundancy. It's only going to be voluntary redundancy. So that's a positive. You're confident with that, right? That people can be very confident there won't be involuntary redundancy.
The agreement we've got is there won't be any compulsory redundancies as part of the USO or part of any change. And the confidence we should have, there's not been one single compulsory redundancy in Royal Mail, because the unions always stopped there. And we're the greatest collective strength, making sure there's never going to be no compulsory redundancies in Royal Mail. And again, EPs agreed that.
Someone says, will VR terms be improved?
Yes. So where we're looking at, and there's always a balance in this, our agenda about equalisation pay, but performance bonus scheme, improving sick pay, improving overtime rates, all come with a cost. So you're always left with, do you give too much to the people who want to leave, or do you keep the money for the people who stay in? We're determined to improve the VR. It was imposed again up to 9 months. On MDEC, we increased it by a further 12 weeks to 51 weeks. We're looking at achieving a year money. We think that's fair. And we're not going to get up to 2 years again. No other trade union has got near that. PT have gone down to a year. I think a year is the right number, and then what we've got to concentrate is those people who stay in. We make sure they get pay, equalising terms, and we improve their terms and conditions.
We've been going an hour, so let's wrap up there. Lots of complicated issues today, as our viewers are recognising. We'll keep talking about this, trying to make it as sort of simple and clear as possible. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem.
Lots of updates, lots of really important updates there. Thank you so much for watching and all your questions. Really great to have, especially your live comments and questions that I can put to CWU representatives. I hope you agree this is a very transparent show. We do want to hear from you, including your tough questions. We're going to leave for now. We'll be back next week. Until then, stick with your union.